Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Nelson, here on this Tuesday afternoon. All the playoff games have concluded, so you can expect me to talk about them once again in this podcast. But for the first segment, I'm going to focus on Mike McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys parting ways, and sort of like some of the reasoning why they parted ways, and as well as my opinions on that and my thought process. Then in the second segment, we're going to go over the Vikings going up against the Rams. That was a surprising game, to say the least. I did not expect that outcome of the game, so we'll talk about that. Then in the third segment, we're going to talk about one takeaway from every single playoff game that took place. So we're just going to, refresh on some of the things that went down over the weekend. And then in the fourth segment, we're going to go ahead and just recap all of the NBA games that took place yesterday. There's also a special fifth segment at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned for that if you guys are interested. Before I begin, I would like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take, a burning question, or anything that you're just dying to share. We're all ears, and if you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. If Super Chat's not really your thing, that's totally fine. You can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcspodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or really helps the show. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead, talk about Mike McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys. So this was reported yesterday while I was doing my my live segments, or like a little bit before, so I couldn't really properly prepare for a segment like this. So that's why I waited until today to sort of talk about that news and why this and that took place. So as we know, this was very surprising to me, because the Dallas Cowboys, they rejected Chicago's offer to interview Mike McCarthy. So after they rejected that, I assumed that Dallas had intentions on keeping Mike McCarthy as the head coach for Dallas for a little bit longer. So what on earth happened? Like, why all of a sudden now they just decide to part ways after rejecting a head coaching deal? Like, it can't be because they just felt like it, because like you don't really deny another team from interviewing your head coach if you don't have intentions of keeping him in the future, right? Like, that just doesn't, even for the Dallas Cowboys, that wouldn't make any sense. But so from what I've heard and from what I've been able to muster, because we don't really have that much information in regards to this move and why they're deciding to part ways. But there were some reports that were saying that they already had the amount of money constructed. The biggest problem between the two sides was negotiating how long that contract would last for. They could not think of a year. So that's very odd how they could think of the number and how much they were planning on paying him annually, but they could not agree with how long they wanted to keep him as the head coach. They could not agree on that, at least according to some of the sources, and that's sort of that's the reason why this ended up falling out, and why both sides ultimately decided to part ways. So very odd, but not really that surprising given how the Cowboys, they mess up in a lot of things. But see, this sad Dallas fan right here, this sad Cowboy, is not a representation of the Dallas fans, but rather a representation of me, because I am going to miss Mike McCarthy as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, because he almost always seems to just have some of the best play calling at the best times if you're a Giants fan like me. I didn't like him beating us 24/7, but one thing I did enjoy was the Cowboys beating themselves in every single postseason game that they've been a part of with Mike McCarthy, and of course with Dak Prescott at the helm. It's just, I am so distraught. I am super sad that now Mike McCarthy is no longer going to be the head coach, because this improves Dallas's chances on winning. Most likely, because McCarthy, he's had several playoff games where he's just obviously he's been the head coach for the Cowboys, so we know there's a lot of disappointment with that, but he was also the head coach for the Green Bay Packers. Now, he did win one time with the Packers, but he also ended up losing when Aaron Rodgers was going on one of the best MVP runs we've ever seen, and he also ended up blowing a game. We all remember that Packers matchup against the Seahawks, where the Seahawks played about as awful as humanly possible, and they were still able to come back late in the fourth quarter. We remember that game. It was a beautiful game. But what exactly, other than making fun of McCarthy and his coaching, what is next for Dallas? Who are they planning on hiring? Who are they planning on bringing in? We really have no idea as of right now, but my speculation, I think that they're obviously going to try and bring somebody in who has worked for the organization already. Jerry Jones, he tends to lean in favor of those people who used to work with him before. He likes to keep the inner circle a little bit. He doesn't like to expand on it all that much. So some options that come to mind are Cliff Kingsbury, the Washington Commanders offensive coordinator. Jerry Jones, he's likely been rather familiar with Cliff Kingsbury before. He's a former NFL head coach and is currently doing strong work as the offensive coordinator. We all know his job with Jaden Daniels is nothing short of impressive, and maybe they wouldn't mind grabbing a division rival coach for themselves. Another option, and I think a much more likely option, is going to be Kellen Moore, the Eagles offensive coordinator. As we know, there's probably in the market right now, there's probably no other coach other than Kellen Moore who is more connected to Dallas than he is. He played quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys before, and he was also a quarterback coach for Dallas and served as the team's offensive coordinator after 1 year with Justin Herbert and the Chargers in 2023. Moore was thriving with the Eagles in 2024 as well. So it would make sense that Dallas would try and would try and give this man a head coaching job, because he already has experience working with Dallas, and usually you'd want to have coaches that have coached your team before. You would it's the same thing with Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions. I mean, he played for the Lions before, so it makes sense how they wouldn't mind putting him at the head coaching job and giving him that head coaching job. And obviously, with his success in turning Saquon Barkley into one of the best running backs in the entire world, this makes him a heavy favorite in that department. There's also Joe Brady, the Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator, and I mean, he's 35 years old, but he has 4 years of experience as an NFL offensive coordinator, including consecutive seasons of having a top 10 scoring offense in Buffalo with Josh Allen. He's not really a name that would grab headlines, but his track record is full of nothing but success. And Brady is probably not going to want to cost as much to hire given his age. He probably won't be as expensive, and also his experience relative to the going rate for NFL head coaching contracts. So that could be an option. Another option is Aaron Glenn, the Lions defensive coordinator. And Aaron Glenn, he's had one of the better resumes this coaching cycle, and he also has other connections with the Cowboys. He played 2 seasons at corner for Dallas in 2005 and 2006 under Bill Parcells. He also molded the Lions' 2024 unit into a top 10 scoring defense despite numerous injuries, and he also ended up helping out the Pro Bowl edge rusher in Aiden Hutchinson develop in Week 6 against the Cowboys and develop over the years as a player. There's also Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, who is an option on the table as well. But again, I think the most likely option for Dallas to go ahead and pick up is Kellen Moore from Philadelphia. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you guys think this was a good move for Dallas? Do you guys who would you like to see being Dallas's head coach? Which coach do you think is the best option? Things like that. But we are out of time in this first segment, so now we're going to go ahead and go into the second segment where I talk about the Vikings going up against the Rams and the conclusion of that game and sort of my thought process. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. Some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to talk about the Vikings going up against the Rams. Before I begin, however, I would like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take or a burning question. And if you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box. If that's not really your thing, then that's fine. You can always use the link displayed below the ticker and send in your comments and donations that way using gsmcpodcast.net. Either or really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. So let's go ahead, get into this second segment, which is talking about the Vikings going up against the Rams. Now, I will say this playoff game was very, very surprising. Now, I did not expect the Rams to win in this one, and I also did not expect them to win by so much. So the final score of this game was 9-27, and the Vikings, they only scored one touchdown throughout the entirety of this game, which is obviously very embarrassing for a team that had as good of a regular season as they did. This is almost like I wouldn't say like, a repeat of what happened to them against the Giants, but considering the fact that they were favorites in both of those games, it is a little bit of a repeat. They have a great regular season, and they go into the playoffs expecting high hopes, and here they go collapsing once again. The only touchdown that they scored was in the third quarter, and by then the game was more or less over. They messed up on the 2-point conversion, which is why they only have 9 points to show for it instead of having 10. And it was really like a really bad game for the Vikings, and at literally the worst times to go completely stagnant and like fall flat on their face. I mean, the Rams, they opened up this game with a touchdown. Then the Vikings couldn't do anything. They had to punt. Then the Rams answered that with a field goal to make the score 10-0, which the Vikings responded to with a field goal to make the score 3-10. And the stage right there was already set for a really close game. But then Sam Darnold threw an interception, which was obviously which was honestly a really bad interception. But that's Sam Darnold. Then the Rams, they couldn't capitalize on the interception, so they punted. But then they ended up fumbling the ball. The Vikings fumbled the ball, which resulted in the Rams taking that fumble all the way to the house and making the score 17-3. Then the Vikings turned the ball over on downs, which the Rams capitalized on with a touchdown drive to make the score 24-3 going into the second half. And the Vikings, they opened it up punting, which the Rams responded with another field goal to make the score 27-3, and that was when the Vikings scored their only touchdown, where they then proceeded to punt or turn the ball over on downs. This was a very embarrassing game for the Vikings in this one. Sam Darnold ended up taking 9 sacks and losing 80-plus yards. That was really, really bad. And since I am going to do takeaways from every single playoff game, I might as well start with this one. One takeaway that I have from this game is that you simply cannot trust Sam Darnold. And it's really that simple, because Sam Darnold, he was reliable all throughout the regular season. Here comes a very important game, and he just completely lays an egg, for lack of a better term. And this also might affect the Vikings' decision to keep him, and it might also affect on how many teams are actually interested in acquiring him. Now, the amount of money that Sam Darnold was projected to make would be for 4 years, and he would be making $218 million. And now, obviously, after this performance, I assume that total is going to go down a lot, because I don't think many people are going to value him at $218 over the span of 4 years. This performance really messed up his contract chances, in my opinion, because if he would have played well in this game, then you could make an argument, and he could make an argument that he should be making more money. But now that he sort of laid an egg in this one and played really bad, he made some really poor decisions, like holding on to the ball a little bit longer than he needed to. Granted, it's not all his fault, as the offensive line couldn't really help Sam Darnold in the slightest. But again, if you know that you're going to that your offensive line is giving off a lot of pressure, then holding on to the ball for a long time is like the last thing that you want to do. And he continued doing that for most of the game. I mean, seriously, giving up 9 sacks, that's like Sam Darnold going right back down to how he was on the Jets, where we know how he was on the Jets. He was absolutely horrible. And this is sort of him regressing back into that nature and holding on to the ball a little bit too long. Granted, obviously, you do have to give credit to the Rams and their defense for being able to get to Sam Darnold and affect him as often as they did. But still, holding onto the ball like that is never good. It's also one of the biggest problems that people have with Shedeur Sanders, and one of the biggest things that sort of affects his draft slots, mainly because, again, Shedeur, he holds onto the ball a lot, and that leaves him open to getting pressured a lot. So you want a quarterback that knows when to hold onto the ball and when to throw it away, not giving up a bunch of yards like how Sam Darnold did in this game. Now, the Rams in this one, they played very well on the offensive side of the ball. Matthew Stafford recorded 209 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the ground, Kyren Williams ended up recording 76 yards on the ground. Now, the passing game was a lot better than the running game in this one for the Rams, but really the biggest story was their defense and their ability to get to Sam Darnold as quickly as they did. Now, the receivers, there was nobody really standing out. Like, Puka Nacua didn't really have an outstanding game that stood out on the box scores. Neither did Cooper Kupp in this one. They both played mediocre, and they basically both just did what they needed to do. The best receiver for the Rams was Tyler Higbee in this one, who recorded 58 yards on 5 receptions. He was targeted 5 times. Now, Puka Nacua, he was targeted way more times, but he also ended with 5 receptions and 44 yards on the day. Cooper Kupp was only targeted once, and still he made it count. grabbing a total of 29 receiving yards on one reception. So again, that's pretty solid. But again, like, the receiving game throughout most of the Rams roster was rather even. Now, on the Vikings, Justin Jefferson did not have a historic game like how I thought he was going to have. Like, I thought he would put up some really good numbers. He only put up 58 receiving yards on 5 receptions. So it wasn't that bad. But again, for somebody as talented as Justin Jefferson, you would assume that he would have a really good receiving game, maybe getting like around 70 receiving yards, or at the very least 85 receiving yards, something like that, and also recording a touchdown, which are both things that he did not do in this game. And again, this game was really just down to Sam Darnold turning back into Sam Darnold. I said that Sam Darnold was one of the things that I feared was going to hold the Vikings back, and one of the biggest weaknesses that the Vikings have going into the postseason. And it turns out that this game was the straw that broke the camel's back, and it was the worst time for Sam Darnold to play this bad. And think about it, the Vikings, they went from being the number 1 seed in the entirety of the NFC and being able to get a first round bye and probably be in a better situation right now. They went from being a team that was worthy of a first round bye to being eliminated in the first round of the postseason. And this was also around the time where people were really questioning why the playoff format was structured the way that it was, because a lot of Vikings fans were making a big hissy fit about how they were 14-3, but they still had to go on the road for a wild card game compared to the Rams, who are at 10-7, and they have the home field advantage in this particular matchup. And obviously we know that it's because of divisions, but a lot of fans were wondering what the purpose of having divisions really were. And I personally think that divisions are really good in football. I think rewarding the team that is able to dominate in their respective division is something that should always be done. And if you just so happen to play a team that has a worse record than you, but you don't have home field advantage, that's just tough. You should have tried to win in your division. And really, it sort of backfired on the people that were saying this, because, okay, here the Vikings are playing a team that on paper is worse than them and a team that has a worse record than them. They should win easily, but here they are on a neutral site, because remember, this game was supposed to be played in Los Angeles, but because of the fires, they were unable to play in Los Angeles, so this game was at a neutral site, and they still ended up losing. So it really shows that being the leader of your division, well, not so much that it matters, but that you can't just brush a team off to the side just because they have a worse record than you. You can't do that. This is a game where anything can happen. So that's all that I really have in the second segment. So now we're going to go into the third segment, where I give one takeaway from each and every playoff game that already took place. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned if you guys are interested.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be thinking of one takeaway from each and every playoff game that took place so far in the wild card. So we're going to go ahead and start this list off with the Chargers game going up. The Chargers, they matched up against the Texans over on Saturday. And the Texans, they made short work of the Chargers. And I think the biggest takeaway that I got from this game is that you cannot rely on Justin Herbert's right arm as much as we previously thought that the Chargers could. Like, when the Chargers drafted this guy, I thought that, there were some issues on the defensive side of the ball that were out of Justin Herbert's control. And there were a lot of things that were preventing Justin Herbert from being a really respected and talented quarterback in this league. And it doesn't really seem like the narrative of him being a top talent is starting to pan out the way that I initially thought going into this. And with Justin Herbert and the Chargers, they ended up losing another easy, well, not really an easy game, but a game that they were favored to win in, because the last time they made it to the postseason with Justin Herbert, they played against Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, and then they ultimately ended up blowing a lead after Trevor Lawrence threw, I want to say maybe he threw 3 or 4 interceptions in the first half, and they still were able to, the Jaguars, they were still able to find a way to win, while Justin Herbert was rather quiet going into the second half. And similar to that game, Justin Herbert didn't really do much in this game. In this time, it was him who was throwing all of the interceptions. Now, throughout the whole season, he threw only 3 interceptions, but in this one game, he threw 4. Which is unbelievable and is completely unprecedented, which is why I say that you can't just completely rely on Justin Herbert's right arm to throw the ball. You need better, much more talent on the Chargers than just Justin Herbert to sort of elevate this squad. At least that's my takeaway from this game. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. But again, it's the Texans, they didn't really seem like that much of a threat going into this game, especially with how C.J. Stroud was playing in the last few weeks. And of course, while I will say that he didn't play awful in this game, it's not like he played completely out of this world, like how people were sort of expecting him to after that ridiculous rookie season. And with that in mind, this gave the Chargers a really good opportunity to win. Obviously, what killed the Chargers in this game was all of those interceptions. So that's my takeaway on this game. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And now let's see, what is the next game that we should go over? I think the next game that we should probably talk about should be the Ravens game between the Ravens and the Steelers. And I think what this game has sort of proven, one takeaway from this is that this cycle that the Steelers constantly go through, having these winning seasons and just not being able to do anything in the postseason, they have to stop, because this is already I want to say maybe the 6th time in the row that the Steelers end up making the playoffs, and they end up getting 0 wins to show for it in these playoffs. It's a little bit embarrassing, because they start out as one of the hottest, one of the best teams in the NFL, and then they close out the season as being one of the worst teams in the NFL. And I'm not trying to exaggerate. This team was, they started out really good, but then they ended up going on I want to say maybe a 6-game losing streak. Towards to cap off the end of the season. They lost to the Ravens, so that's 1 loss, and then they lost to the Bengals the week before. Then they lost to the Chiefs and the Ravens, and then the Eagles. So that's 5 straight losses in a row for this Steelers team, and it was really just absolutely disgusting the way that they ended up losing. And in the last 7 games, they ended up going 2-5, which is And the 2 wins that they got in those 2 weeks, they were against the Browns, so, rather a very bad team. The Browns are not good. And the Bengals, who have one of the worst defenses in all of the NFL. And even then, the Steelers still ended up splitting the series against the Browns. They ended up losing all the way back on the 21st of November. So this Steelers team and this cycle has just been constant throughout the last few years. Now, I don't really think you're going to fire Mike Tomlin, because despite everything that I said about, this whole cycle that the Steelers go through, I don't think you should fire a coach that knows how to win, especially with the lack of talent that this team has. You just need to figure out a good way to accumulate talent, maybe build around an actual young quarterback, and not work with somebody that's old and on the verge of retiring like Russell Wilson. Now, I do think that this season has sort of rejuvenated his career and how much time he actually has left in this league, but still, this is a cycle that the Steelers, they just can't keep doing. And obviously, as for the Ravens, this is just, a talented team doing what they need to get done. And I should also point out that the last year, the AFC teams that made it past the wild card round are the exact same AFC teams that made it past the wild card round this year. So the Texans, they made it past last year, the Ravens made it past last year, and the Bills, they were also able to make it past last year. So this is these are the same 2 teams that were dominant last year, and they're the same 2 teams, not the same 2 teams, the same 4 teams that were dominant last year back in the exact same position, only this time they're playing against different opponents in this year. Obviously, we know the Ravens, they played against the Kansas City Chiefs last year. Technically, the Chiefs, they played the Bills, and then the Ravens played the Houston Texans, I believe, and then the Chiefs and the Ravens ended up crossing paths in the AFC Championship game. So it looks like that story is going to somewhat repeat itself, except this time we're going to have a great quarterback duel between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Speaking of Josh Allen, I might as well go ahead and talk about the next game on this list, which is the Bills and the Broncos. And simply put, Josh Allen seems to be a quarterback that can win playoff games, and it doesn't really matter who's on the squad, right? Like, before, it was thought that, okay, Josh Allen is a little bit of a turnover machine, but it doesn't matter. He has some really good receivers like Stephon Diggs to help him in his gunslinging role. But now it's sort of without anybody on the team, and anyone noteworthy on the team, I should say, the Bills are still in the exact same spot that they've been able to be in before. And for a takeaway that I have for the Broncos is that they're right there. They just need a little bit more experience. They have the quarterback, and it seems like they have the receiving core that they need. Well, not really. They have a solid receiving core. They just need to get a little bit more dominant in the run game. And when they become a team that can run the ball really well, then they're going to be very dangerous. But again, same story with the Bills every single year. They're a competing team, and they're always going to be a competing team with Josh Allen, which is, I think, the biggest takeaway. The Bills are always going to be a team competing for the Super Bowl as long as they have Josh Allen playing like he's the best quarterback in the NFL. Next is the Eagles, and a takeaway for them in this Packers game that they played. I might as well use this one because that one's a little bit of a better picture. Now, the Eagles and their offense, they didn't really do much in this game, but neither did the Packers in this one. So I guess the biggest takeaway that I have is that the Packers are as limited to their successes as or will determine their successes by how well Jordan Love can play in these big games, because we saw how last year he was able to play rather solid up until the very end against the 49ers. Again, remember, the Packers, they ended up stunning the Cowboys and beating them in the wild card round. Then they had to play the Niners, and then they ended up losing in embarrassing fashion because Jordan Love threw a costly interception. So the way I see it, the Packers are only going to go as far as Jordan Love is able to take them. And this game was strictly on whether or not Jordan Love can have a good game. Throwing 3 interceptions and 0 touchdowns is not a winning formula for the Packers. And obviously, not really much that needs to be said about the Eagles because they sort of just handled business with Jordan Love playing bad. And again, it's just like not a very good situation to be in where you have to rely on this quarterback, and this quarterback has been rather shaky in these last few weeks and in the season overall. And it took him like through the last 7 games of the season, he did not throw an interception up until that game, which is really, really bad. And finally, I already gave my takeaway for the Rams game, but the last game that I have not given my takeaway from is the Commanders going up against the Bucs. And the key takeaway that I have in this one is that the Commanders have finally found their starting quarterback and their franchise quarterback that they've been looking for so long. And while I will say a lot of these games haven't been that dominant of a win, the Commanders in the last few games that they've played in, every single one of those games was really, really close. But it's all down to how the quarterback can play in these close moments that determine whether or not he is a franchise starting quarterback, right? I feel like a lot of people can agree on that. Any quarterback that can finish a game or can dig you out of a hole is a quarterback that you want to keep for a very long time. And they found that quarterback in Jayden Daniels. So that's my takeaway on this. And that's all that I have. Let me know in the comments if there is a takeaway that I missed, or maybe there is an even bigger takeaway that you guys have for this game that I haven't thought of. But that's all that I have for this third segment. So now we're going to go into the fourth segment where I just recap all of the NBA games that took place yesterday. I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, I'm just going to recap all of the NBA games that took place yesterday. Before I do that, however, there is a report going around, a little bit of a rumor that's going around in the NFL saying that the Packers are expected to aggressively pursue a wide receiver market this offseason to help their franchise quarterback Jordan Love. Now, according to some sources, the Packers, they're looking to reunite with Davante Adams. As we know, Davante Adams had great years with the Packers with the help of Aaron Rodgers at the helm. And that's not the only wide receiver that the Packers are going to be looking for. They're also trying to see if they can come up with contracts for free agents T. Higgins and Amari Cooper at the end of this season. And it's worth noting that Green Bay is seen as an under-the-radar team to try and get Tyreek Hill as well. So those are some of the wide receivers that the Packers are looking for. I thought it would be rather interesting that I brought that up. So let me know in the comments, who do you guys think would be a really good fit for the Packers and their system, and what wide receiver you'd like to see in a Packers uniform. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead talk about these NBA games that took place over yesterday. And let's see, what game to start with, because that's usually like the most difficult thing, figuring out which game to start with. I think I'm going to start with the Lakers game. So after this game, the Lakers are now they've lost 3 straight, obviously a lot of people on the Lakers roster are busy, trying to protect their homes from all the fires and stuff like that. So there's been a little bit of a distraction for the Los Angeles teams, in particular the Lakers and the Clippers. Now, Anthony Davis did not let this distraction get to his head, as he recorded 30 points and 13 rebounds, but it wasn't enough to beat the Spurs. The Spurs ended up winning 126-102. LeBron at age 40 dropped 18 points, 8 assists, and 5 rebounds. But again, the Spurs, they just had way too many players in the 30 points column. Victor Wembanyama, Stephon Castle, as well as Devin Vassell. Unnecessarily rhymed, I'm sorry. All three of those players, they ended up recording 23 points. And when you have 3 players on your roster scoring 23 points, that's very difficult for any team to overcome, unless they have someone who's dropping, 50 or something like that. And Harrison Barnes also played really well for the Spurs with 17 points. Basically, everybody in the Spurs starting roster ended up getting double digits. And they also shot 37% from 3 compared to the Lakers, who shot 31% from 3. And obviously, when you win in the 3-point battle, chances are you win the game. Now, the Knicks, they ended up losing to the Pistons. The Pistons have won, I want to say, 8 of their last 10, something like that. They've been on a roll throughout the last few games. And okay, so let me just go ahead and look at they've only lost 1 game in January so far, which is a very good record for Pistons standards. And they got a win against Orlando, win against Charlotte, win against Minnesota, Portland, and Brooklyn. So that brings the win total up to 5. Then they lost to Golden State, but then they won back-to-back, going up against the Raptors and going up against New York. So in total, that is 7 games that they've won out of the 8 games that they've played. And the 1 game that they lost to against Golden State, they only lost to them by 3 points. So it's looking up for Detroit and their little basketball establishment that they have. Cade Cunningham ended up recording 36 points, and Malik Beasley ended up icing the game late, and he ended up scoring 22 points overall, but I think he scored the final points for Detroit to seal the win. Now, on New York's side, Karl Anthony Towns had 26 points and 12 rebounds. Jalen Brunson had 31 points and 11 assists. Josh Hart had 12 points and 14 rebounds, and Mikal Bridges, remembered, had a shoot in this game, scoring 27 points. But again, it wasn't enough to go up against the Pistons in this one. The Warriors, they ended up losing to the Raptors. They ended up losing 104-101. And they did have Steph Curry in this one, who, it should also be noted, Steph Curry does not want any of the Warriors to risk any of their young players in a risky trade. So it doesn't seem like, again, the end is near for Steph, and if you are the Warriors, you are going to want to try and negotiate a trade that would put the Warriors in a title contending position while you have Steph Curry playing basketball. Obviously, that's something that the Warriors are looking to do, but Steph Curry, he's sort of like suggesting that they do not try to risk a late season trade. And he ended the game with 26 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists. Andrew Wiggins ended with 20 points. But for a team that's tanking, losing 104-101, that's just unacceptable for Golden State. And Scotty Barnes ended up recording 23 points. Jacob Poeltl ended up recording 13 points and 13 rebounds. And Davion Mitchell dropped 0 points in 27 minutes, and they were still able to win. That's a little embarrassing if you're Golden State. Now, next game on this list, the Timberwolves, they ended up beating the Washington Wizards. Don't really need to talk about that game all that much. The most important Washington team right now are the Commanders. And Jordan Poole, he made a return in this game, but he only dropped 20 points. Meanwhile, Anthony Edwards dropped 41 and 7. So he also was able to get 3 steals along with those 7 assists. So great game coming in from Anthony Edwards. Julius Randle had a double-double with 20 points and 10 rebounds. And Rudy Gobert also had a double-double, 11 points and 11 rebounds. So not really much that needs to be said about this game. And the Rockets, they ended up playing the Memphis Grizzlies, and they ended up beating them 120-118. Jalen Green had 42 points in this one, which is, I believe it's a season high for him. And on the Grizzlies side, John Morant had 29, Desmond Bane had 25, and that was really all that she wrote in this one. Despite the Grizzlies shooting 43% from three, that wasn't enough to go up against Houston, who ended up shooting 51.6% from three. So that's a very difficult three-point percentage to beat. When you're shooting 51% as a team, it's very rare that a team like that ends up losing. And think they were only able to win by 120 despite the fact that they were shooting that well. So assuming that they don't have a dominant shooting performance like the way that they did, I'm going to assume that the Memphis Grizzlies are a better team than the Houston Rockets, just based off of that like shooting luck. Again, it's very difficult to get that lucky in shooting the ball when you're in the postseason. So just keep that in mind. And then the last game, the Clippers, they ended up playing against the Miami Heat, and still no. Excuse me. I apologize for that, but there's still no reports on whether or not Jimmy Butler is going to get traded. Now there's not any real traction that has been made on a deal yet. So a little bit unsure exactly what's going to happen there. Jimmy Butler allegedly told Pat Riley to his face that he didn't want to be a part of the Miami Heat anymore. So Miami is going to have to trade him. And if they don't trade him, they're going to suffer the consequences of having an unhappy Jimmy Butler, and I'm sure a lot of Timberwolves fans still recall to this day. And this is unfortunate because this is wasting a really good season from Tyler Hero, who ended up dropping 32 points and 11 rebounds in this game. Still, it wasn't enough to go up against James Harden or Norman Powell. Norman Powell had 29 points. James Harden had 26 points, 11 assists. Ivica Zubac had 21 points and 20 rebounds. And it should also be noted that Kawhi Leonard has returned and has been playing, but he has not been nearly as potent as he was before. In this game, he only had 6 points and 5 rebounds for 21 minutes. So not a very ideal Kawhi Leonard game, but still, he's back, and that should spell good news for Clippers fans. But that's all that I have in this fourth segment. So now we're going to go into the fifth segment, where I talk about a little bit of a rumor that's been going around. Well, not really going around in the NBA, but was a thing in the NBA for a while, and we just didn't have any reports confirming this. So I just wanted to talk about that. Spoilers, this is about Michael Jordan and Isaiah Thomas. So if you guys are interested in that, be sure to tune into the fifth segment. I will be right back. And we are back with the fifth segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this final segment, we're going to talk about the sort of not really a drama between Michael Jordan and Isaiah Thomas. This has been drama that has been it's been around since, I want to say, 1992, maybe even longer than that. But this is obviously like referring to the incident on the Dream Team, and it was brought back to light a few years ago when Michael Jordan put out the Last Dance documentary, and it had a lot of people wondering whether or not, like, as we know, Michael Jordan and Isaiah Thomas, they did not like each other. Specifically, Michael Jordan not liking Isaiah Thomas. They matched up in the playoffs for several years, and for, I want to say, maybe 3 years, the Pistons almost always ended up getting on top and beating the Chicago Bulls. Now, the issue for Chicago, we all know that I'm a huge LeBron fan, but I'm not going to act like Michael Jordan was not a talented basketball player. The issue was that the Bulls did not have enough talent to go up against the Detroit Pistons. Now, Michael Jordan failed to say this in his Last Dance documentary, but the biggest reason why they ended up beating the Pistons eventually was because that the Bulls were able to match themselves up equally in talent with this Detroit Pistons squad. And it's been, obviously we know Michael Jordan does not like losing, and because he doesn't like losing, he does not like people who beat him, and that would obviously put Isaiah Thomas as the main target as to why he does not like him. But one of the biggest reasons why Michael Jordan does not like Isaiah Thomas is because of what Isaiah Thomas did back in 1991, when the Bulls finally ended up beating the Pistons. They ended up sweeping them in the playoff series. The Pistons, they did not want to shake Michael Jordan's hand, and so all of the starters that were on the bench, they decided to walk out of the arena, and Michael Jordan did not. He took that very personally, because in every single one of the playoff games where the Bulls ended up losing to this team, no matter how much it hurt Michael Jordan to do it, he always would shake Isaiah Thomas's hand. And because that's just a sportsmanship thing. It represents somebody who has class. And obviously, Scottie Pippen and the Pistons at that point were dubbed as a team that did not necessarily have that class, and that sort of rubbed Michael Jordan the wrong way. And a lot of people speculate whether or not this uneasy relationship between these two is the reason why Isaiah Thomas wasn't selected to join the Dream Team back in 1992. So, in Isaiah's words, he said he met the criteria to be selected, but he wasn't. And a lot of people speculate, at the time and still to this day, that Michael Jordan was the biggest reason why Isaiah Thomas wasn't on the Dream Team. So basically, it went something like this. Michael Jordan was like, I don't want to play with Isaiah Thomas. You either get me on the Dream Team without Isaiah Thomas, or you don't get me on the Dream Team at all. And obviously, at the time when Michael Jordan was considered by many to be the best basketball player in the world, the United States team, they went with the decision of deciding to pick Michael Jordan over picking Isaiah Thomas, and obviously, in my opinion, that was the right move, because you would rather want Michael Jordan on your team as opposed to Isaiah Thomas. Even though Isaiah Thomas was a very talented point guard, the team was already getting Magic Johnson to come out of retirement to play for them, and they also already had John Stockton and some other talented point guards. So having Isaiah Thomas as opposed to having Michael Jordan, I feel like, Michael Jordan made that Dream Team what it was. And whether or not Michael Jordan was the sole reason why Isaiah Thomas wasn't on the Dream Team was still rather unclear. There were, yes, maybe Michael Jordan did not want him on the team, but there were also several other players who also did not want Isaiah Thomas on the team. The Pistons, they were not liked by any major star in the NBA. I mean, Larry Bird had some beef with them. Scottie Pippen also had beef with them. and basic more or less like half the team. Chuck also had beef with the Pistons. They did not like, neither one of those guys liked the play style that the Pistons ended up going out with, and because we know the Pistons, they were very rough around the edges, and they would try to get these cheap fouls and things like that would upset the other players. And this is the main team that was like, that would get quoted with back in my day it was very physical and things like that. This was the main team that started the whole physicality narrative, and whether or not Michael Jordan was the sole reason for that was rather unclear, but we do have some reason now, according to some other sources. Now, it's been reported that Jordan revealed his plot to exclude Isaiah Thomas, according to a call that he made to Rod Thorne. So here's the quote. It said, "Rod Thorne called me. I said, Rod, I won't play if Isaiah Thomas is on the team," Jordan said. "He assured me," he said, "you know what? Chuck doesn't want Isaiah, so Isaiah is not going to be a part of the team." And however, Thorne, the executive in charge of putting together the Dream Team, denied any such conversation. There was, he said, quote, "There was never anything in my conversation with Jordan that had to do with Isaiah Thomas, period." And he said, I'll do it. Isaiah's name never came up during the conversation, and he never backtracked and said he didn't want to do it from that time, to those of us in the NBA office. And even in the report, well, not really in the report, but even in the Last Dance documentary, when they were talking about it and when Michael Jordan was talking about it, he said that it wasn't just him that had the decision. Like, he was saying that everybody sort of immediately blamed him as the reason why Isaiah Thomas wasn't on the team, when it was like a whole group decision that the group didn't want Isaiah Thomas on the team. It was like, I don't want to say it's a similar situation to what the women's team did with Caitlin Clark, but it feels like it a little bit, where you have a group of these stars that don't want a specific star to join the team. But the reasoning for that is rather different between why the women didn't want Caitlin as opposed to why Team USA did not want Isaiah Thomas. But it still sort of feels like a similar issue. But regardless, according to this quote, it was said that Michael Jordan wasn't too keen on having Isaiah Thomas on the Dream Team. So again, let me know in the comments what you guys think happened, whether you guys agree with the report, or maybe you guys don't think that this is true. Maybe it was a whole team decision. I'm curious what you guys have to say to that. But that's all that I have in this segment. That's it for the show. Thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. As usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take or a burning question. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box. If that's not really your thing, then you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way as well. That's all that I have today on this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that